Okay, welcome back to my podcast and stream on the future of business and technology, where I dive into the latest topic in business and tech. And today's topic is how voice technology, enabled by the latest advances in AI, is poised to drastically alter the way we live and how companies do business. And to help me discuss this topic, I'm joined today by Tobias Dengel, who is the author of the brand new book, The Sound of the Future, The Coming Age of Voice Technology. Hi, Tobias.
Hi, Bernard. Thanks for having me.
It's so lovely to have you with us. Where are you joining us from today?
I'm in Charlottesville, Virginia, where our company is headquartered, University Town. So lots of research and tech here.
Very good. So maybe we can start with you giving us a little bit of your background. Where have you come from? How did you end up doing what you're doing today?
Sure. So I've always been interested in the intersection of business and technology. When you think about new technology, there's two places to play. You can play on the research theoretical side, which is often universities, but large labs as well, private labs, or in the practical side, how to make it usable for consumers. So I studied engineering and business, and then did a couple years in management consulting at Carney. But then very early in my career, 1996, went to AOL and spent 7 years there. And that was really the dawn of the internet. And I learned a lot of things at AOL, but the biggest thing I learned is that when it comes to digital, user experience will always win. And so that's been my mantra ever since. Left AOL in '03 to start a company called leads.com, which was an early purveyor of internet advertising as small businesses migrated from print yellow pages, which they'd been advertising in for 100 years, to all of a sudden people started using Google and Yahoo to find small businesses. So we helped them build websites and advertise at scale. And then in 2009, after that business had been acquired, left and started Willow Tree, we were very early in the mobile wave, but it was very clear to me the day that Steve Jobs opened up the iPhone to software developers that this was going to be a very, very big deal and change the world. And what's interesting is I think now we're on a second wave, or third wave. If you think the internet's the first one, mobile was the second. This generative AI / conversational AI is the third wave.
Very good. So, what inspired you to write the Sound of the Future, and why now?
So the interesting thing is there are always prognosticators of new technologies that are out there pounding the table. This is going to happen next. One of my favorite books is Crossing the Chasm. I think that's from the early 90s even, that talks about why some technologies make it into the mainstream and some don't. And the core thesis is, are they really solving a problem? So if you were at CES, Consumer Electronics Show in Vegas in 2013, you would have been told that 3D television was the future. And by now, 80%, 90% of households would have a 3D TV. I don't know a single person that has one. And then the same thing happened with Google Glass and some of the early AR. The same thing has happened with autonomous vehicles. A bunch of research out in 2018 said by 2023, half of the cars in North America would be autonomous vehicles, virtually none. And so it all comes down to multiple factors, but a critical one is, what problem does it solve for human beings? What is the real breakthrough? With the internet, it was obvious it was the access to the world of information and to other human beings. With mobile, it was obvious it was taking the internet and putting it in your pocket, always on, always with you. Now with voice, it's accelerating our interface with devices and machines by at least a factor of 3. And that's the breakthrough, right? It's all about speed. And that's why when Siri and Alexa were introduced, they got such an early uptake. But just like the internet and mobile, it's taken, and it will continue to take, a long time to get the user interface right, to get multimodality right, to really take advantage of the speed. But at the core of it, it's human beings can speak 3 times as fast as they can type on a keyboard, probably 5 times on average as fast as they can type on a mobile device. So that's why we all want to talk to Siri and Alexa and tell them what to do. We don't want to necessarily listen to them. We'll get into that later. But that's the core insight. And so our clients are always asking us, what's next? What's the next big thing? And we are very much convinced it's voice powered by generative AI. Those two things coming together are the breakthrough.
Yeah, I completely agree that voice will play a completely different role in the future. So, from your point of view, how will voice technology, accelerated by the recent developments in AI, in particular in generative AI, have the potential to alter the way we live and how companies do business?
Yeah, so I think the way to contemplate this is when Alexi and Siri came out and they got uptakes and people built like little skills and apps for Alexa, they didn't see the uptake that they wanted, and so people have soured on voice. My view is that Alexa and Siri are a lot like AOL was in the 90s. It's showing us the early way, but it's not doesn't have the power of the internet because it hasn't been unleashed yet. And it's also similar to, if you recall, WAP technologies in the early 2000s, the earliest forms of mobile or even BlackBerry that weren't unleashed yet until the iPhone unleashed them through a new interface, right? It was a larger interface, but more importantly, it had swiping, tapping, et cetera. So the problems right now with voice is that, like any new technology, it is being implemented in the paradigm of the old technology. And in the paradigm of what we know as human beings. So it's called conversational. The devices are actually called smart speakers, whereas really they should be called smart mics, because the core issue is, again, we can speak so much faster, but we can also read much more quickly than we can listen. So the future has to be a completely new multimodal interface where we tell machines what to do, but the response is not Alexa and Siri like responding, or ChatGPT responding in voice. It's responding in text, or more likely graphically or in video. So the easiest example I can give that I think most people get immediately is, if I want to order movie tickets, it's really easy for me to ask Alexa and Siri what's playing tonight. What I really don't want to do is listen to Alexa and Siri list the 5 movies that are playing and 3 showtimes each, right? That's movie phone. That was around 30 years ago. What I want is just to see it on my screen. And then I want to say, get me 2 tickets at 8 p.m. for Star Wars, and I'm already pre-authenticated, et cetera, et cetera. And so our belief is you're going to talk straight to your apps, not to Siri and Alexa, because you don't know what Siri and Alexa can do. It's this huge discoverability problem. And you don't want voice responses. You want visual responses. And now you've taken, on average, it takes about 3 minutes to order a movie ticket today on an app. It's going to take it to 15 seconds. And going back to my AOL days, I can guarantee you, when you take something that takes 3 minutes and you can do it in 15 seconds, the world is going to change overnight.
Very good. So you make it very clear that voice tech is much more than Siri and Alexa. So maybe you can give us some voice technology applications that might surprise the average person, and outline how they differ from what's currently in most people's homes.
Yeah, so I think the first thing to think about is this concept of voice assistance is, while it might have certain applications and certain future applications, is largely not the way we are going to experience voice as end users. We are going to experience it as a layer that sits on top of every device and every app and every website that we interface with. So that's kind of the first paradigm shift. The second is, it's not just going to be in our apps and our smartphones. I mean, it's already coming out. You can tell Spotify what songs you want to sing. You can hear, you can tell Waze where you want to go. These are like the very earliest applications. You're going to start seeing mic buttons in all these apps. But I think what's most surprising for folks is you're going to see really every interface between human beings and machines transition to voice first. So applications are now happening in manufacturing, where folks are, they need both their hands and they need their eyes on something but they're going to communicate with the device via voice. So one of the most interesting, or right out of the gate applications is Cathay Pacific has implemented voice-powered technology for the folks that clean planes. They have about 8 minutes to turn around a whole plane. They're running around, et cetera. They now have voice that says, "Hey, seat 13C, it has a broken armrest." While they're doing their thing. Now, today, they would have to take their app out, find the thing, blah, 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 get interrupted for 5 minutes in the middle of an 8-minute process. So that's a micro example. A more macro example is both the United States Air Force and the Russian Air Force are deploying voice-based cockpits in military planes, which are now going to come to civilian aircraft. But the idea is that as a human being, you can tell the machine much more quickly what to do by using your voice than by touching the screen or using a lever or a knob. And that then goes to safety, right? The 737 MAX Boeing accidents all happened because pilots didn't know what the plane was doing and couldn't interface. And if they had a voice command that said, turn off the autopilot, XYZ, go here, whatever it was, it would have avoided those accidents. So voice is coming into play in all kinds of industrial and transportation applications as a safety mechanism and as a speed mechanism.
Yeah, so you make it clear just today and also in your book that voice will be part of this multimodal interface, where it is blending with things like speech, screens, haptics, and so on. How is this changing? Have you got any other examples of how this is changing how we interact with machines?
Yeah, so I think human beings are incredibly smart and intuitive, and we're already doing multimodal every day. And we do it by when we're sending a text chat, we dictate our text, but then we don't listen to the response, we read it. So even though the systems weren't really designed in that way, human beings are smart enough to kind of figure out how to optimize these systems very intuitively. And so that is, one of the most obvious examples I can give how multimodal works, and how it's going to pervade every single application, et cetera. Another example is the average banking app, right, has over 300 functions that you can do. And organizing 300 functions on a screen that small, virtually impossible. But if you want to reorder checks or you want to send someone money, that as a voice command is so fast, so simple, so easy. That, again, example of where there's a huge amount of volume of potential things that you can do or things to search for. For example, we're working with a large soft drink manufacturer right now. They have 10,000 folks that service hundreds of thousands of machines, vending machines, but also, services in bars and restaurants. They have to order parts, right? And right now they have either catalogs in their trucks or they have to search through hundreds of thousands of units on their device. Now they can just say, and we know where they're standing, hey, order me a new nozzle for this machine, and it happens instantly. And so, the applications aren't just in making our consumer lives more convenient, faster. It's going to pervade all industry where people interface with devices. And by the way, people interface with devices everywhere.
Yeah, very good. So this whole human-machine connection will be enabled by voice. And in your book, you mentioned that voice tech will actually make technology more human. And I would love you to delve deeper into this. How can voice technology enhance our emotional connection with machines?
Yeah, so our interface with machines has been largely through our fingers, right? Through either keyboards or levers or knobs, which is not very personal. The primary way we communicate with other human beings is through voice, is through speaking. What we have to establish between humans and machines is trust. And I think the current approaches to voice assistants actually are counterproductive in that regard. There's this concept of the uncanny valley that was developed in Japan in the 1970s when they were looking at robots that figured out the more human-like a robot is without actually being human, the less trustworthy it is for humans. We get freaked out by things that are human-like. There's all kinds of theories like zombies or we think it's a corpse or whatever, but there's a human response there. And I think as we try to make voice more human-like in these assistants, and we don't tell people that it's a computer, our user trust goes way, way down. And that's another reason this multimodal interface is going to be so powerful, because we are not judging the machine as a human, and we know it's not a human. We're judging it as a machine, and that actually builds trust. The second part of the equation is that it's going to make our interaction with other humans less machine-based. So when I now go to my primary care doctor, he or she is typing on their computer the entire time that I'm in the office, entering the information that I'm telling him or her, which is completely inefficient, right? The second I say it, the information in theory is out there, and the device should be picking up that information, analyzing it, using then generative AI systems to analyze the information faster than a doctor can. And the doctor is actually having a human relationship with me and talking me through my options and et cetera, et cetera. The machine is doing all the analytical work. So that's just another example of how this is going to play itself out.
Very good. And voice technology will also help with accessibility to technology. How do you believe voice technology can help in bridging the digital divide and making technology more accessible to everyone, including those with disabilities?
So one example is an app that my company WillowTree just recently launched called Vocable, which is designed to help users, patients that have lost the ability to speak. Today, they have incredibly cumbersome mechanics they have to use their eyes to spell things out. And so what we can do is use voice technology to to interpret what someone else in the room is asking them, then giving that user the most likely responses, which generative AI is incredibly efficient at. And then they use their eyes to respond, and they can almost have a real-time conversation at the same pace that you and I are having a conversation right now, versus today, where it's just excruciatingly, brutally slow for someone to spell out words one letter at a time. So that's one area. The other is around literacy. There's still well over 1 billion people in the world that are illiterate. Voice technology is going to make that less important in their lives, because now everything they say can instantly be transposed for them, and they can listen to things. They don't have to be able to necessarily read it. It's incredibly powerful for some of the smaller languages. In India, there are hundreds of languages. Many of the speakers of those languages, if they don't know English, have been left completely behind by, as part of the digital divide. And they're going to be able to be as much part of the digital world as you and I are. I've seen these incredible tools that are it's not real time, but it's within seconds, translation tools that would allow, in theory, for you to call someone who speaks a completely different language and have a conversation with them, which, has practical applications in terms of call centers. Now you could put a call center literally anywhere, but also just in terms of getting human beings in touch with the world of information.
Very good example. So the world of business then, in what ways do you think businesses will be transformed by the evolution of voice technology, and what industries will change the most, maybe over the next 5 years, because of voice technology?
So that's the hardest question, right? You don't really know, because there are all kinds of second and third order impacts. When Steve Jobs in 2008 announced the iPhone, I don't think anyone was saying, "Oh my gosh, the taxi industry is in real trouble because someone's going to start developing ride-hailing apps," right? So that took, Uber didn't start the next day, but it evolved over the next 3 years or so. So whenever there's a change in interface, these things tend to take time. And in the book, we talk about there's typically three phases. There's one, the automation of current processes, right? So if you take quick serve restaurants, that's an easy one because we all know what they do. That's already happened, right? McDonald's has implemented voice technology in the drive-through. I think Wendy's announced it a couple weeks ago. White Castle announced it literally this week. So that's happening, but it's really automating things as they currently stand. And that's always the first phase. The second phase is that they're going to start reinventing business processes completely, right? Do they, what is it? How does a drive-through even work if someone can order on their app via voice instead of having to go through the processes? So they're going to start redoing the whole process. And then the third is disrupting the entire industry. Like, what is the concept of a restaurant in the future if you have everyone ordering on voice? No one wants to sit there anymore. Everyone's picking up. And so then in the third phase of this is then when industries are completely disrupted. And that's going to happen, I think, in very, very many industries. And there's going to be all kinds of vendors providing services to industries that allow them to use voice to get much, much more efficient in virtually everything they do internally and externally. If you think about most companies, most people are spending most of their days interfacing with a device or computer of some sort. And if you think about that's going to get 3 times faster, that's kind of all you have to know. Then you can start immediately thinking about what do our employees do? What do our customers do with devices and machines that interface with us? And how can we take advantage of this new technology?
One concern that people always have when you talk about advanced technology, especially AI, is the impact on jobs. And if I think about some jobs like audiobook narrators, for example, and others, what would be the impact? Because Apple has just announced that they can now narrate audiobooks automatically. You can choose the voice, you can automatically translate it in whatever language you want. What jobs do you think will be automated away and what jobs will be augmented by this technology?
Yeah, so whenever these technology changes happen, we always end up with more jobs rather than fewer jobs because the technology unleashes these efficiencies that make things easier to do. And then all of a sudden, the overall usage of things goes up. I mean, I go back to gasoline, right? It used to be $10 a gallon. It's down to $10 like 100 years ago, but there's much more gasoline being sold because now it's accessible to everyone. So there's going to be so many more uses for technology unleashed by this. So there will, everything is shown us there will be more jobs, but there will be disruption. And I think this is where policy decisions, governments have to come in and support. We are in an age where there's backlash against globalization because I think most governments didn't take into account the fact that, yes, it's a net benefit if more manufacturing is done overseas because goods are cheaper, et cetera, and it actually increases net employment. Unemployment is very low in the West. But the people who are disrupted, it really has a negative impact on their lives. So certainly things like call centers are going to be changed, or contact centers. Audiobook narration is an obvious one. But so there are certainly pockets. I think folks that spend a lot of time on data entry, that's going to be largely automated. But there's all new classes of work that are going to come about. I mean, just within the last 6 or 9 months, this concept of prompt engineer has emerged. Conversational designer has emerged. But they will be more technical than the jobs that go away. And so giving access to re-education or more education in technology, I think for societies, especially in the West, is just absolutely critical.
Yeah, and every technology obviously comes with some challenges. What other potential pitfalls or concerns do you see with voice technology and its growth?
So it's going to be an arms race around security because it is so easy to spoof voices and, in fact, entire videos of users. And so I think there's going to be a rash of voice used for evil, to trick especially elderly folks with fake phone calls and asking for, so there's a whole category there. There's password authentication around voice that's going to have to be dealt with. But there's going to be an arms race on the other side, just like there always is, with people figuring out how to block these things and how to stop these things and how to educate folks. So that's one category. People talk about AI more generally running amok and battling the humans. I'm not super worried about that, at least in our lifetimes, because Gen AI isn't wired into the systems to actually do anything, right? ChatGPT is awesome, but it can't even change your mailing address for your American Express card right now because it's not wired into the system. But it can be used for evil pretty effectively. And we, obviously we have a regime in Russia that's started a war. We have regimes in places like Iran that are at war in a certain sense with the West. And so those types of actors can use this technology. And I think it's incumbent on our security apparatus to be ahead of that. So I think those are the two big categories: is security and governments using it to accelerate programs that they already have.
So how can companies that want to start and leverage voice technology make sure that they consider all the ethical implications of this technology? What are the kind of things they need to consider?
Yeah, I think it's the biggest issue is always transparency when you're dealing with consumers, is being clear what's a computer, what's not a computer, and how the data that's being collected is used and how long it's being used, and is it anonymized and not anonymized. Amazon got in a lot of trouble early days because it certainly seemed to most users that Alexa was listening to everything that was going on in the house. And then that data was being stored and potentially used. There were a lot of stories of people talking at the family dinner table about a vacation they wanted, and then all of a sudden they went on Amazon the next day and there was an ad for that vacation, for that trip. So that's not okay. And I think the transparency is key, and finding mechanisms to do that. The whole cookie thing was well-intentioned, but going to every website and getting a cookie pop-up, I don't know that that's super exactly what we all had wanted in terms of transparency either. So making sure that we're as transparent as possible is always the key piece. And then vis-a-vis security, I use in the book that a lot of banks are using voice security, voice authentication to get into your account, which is super awesome, super convenient, however can be spoofed. Now, it's not as easy to spoof as people might think, because there's a whole series of technology that you can actually, at least today, figure out if something is a spoofed voice or not. It sounds the same to human beings, but there's an electronic footprint that you can figure out that it's been spoofed. But again, that's an arms race. I think the key to everything security-wise for consumers is two-factor.
Very good. Are there any regions or countries leading the way in voice technology, and how does the cultural context play a role in all of this and the adoption of voice?
Yeah, so I think the largest driver of voice technology is the size of the audience in terms of how many speakers of a given language there are. So English has always tended to be first because so much of the innovation is happening in the United States, and it's such a huge global footprint for English. The same thing goes for Mandarin. There's a ton of innovation in voice technology, and I think actually the China, Japan, those countries are going to be ahead of the United States and other European countries, because it's even more difficult and slower to type using their alphabets, et cetera, than it is the English alphabet. And so the advantage, when I say it's 3 times faster to speak, it might be in Mandarin 10 times faster to speak than to type. And so a lot of the pressure and innovation and breakthroughs are going to come in China and Japan, I think.
Very good. What's a good first step that anyone can take to get ready for this coming age of voice?
I think it's workshops, right? So Apple pioneered this concept of getting multifaceted teams together where you get technology leads, design leads, business owners, and actually frontline practitioners in companies together for a pretty light session. It can be 1 day, it can be 3 days, but really mapping out everything they do and thinking about how is voice going to impact the business processes or the relationships with end customers. Bringing in a consultant, I think is always helpful, who have seen it done at other companies for these workshop type things. But that's always the first step, because then you start defining what's possible, but you're doing it in the context of what's realistic as well, because you've got some of your tech folks involved, that it's not just like blue pie in the sky. And then making a roadmap, right? Ultimately, it's about what's our roadmap for attacking this new technology. And I think right now, a lot of companies are saying, what's our Gen AI roadmap? And what they're missing is that the primary interface to Gen AI is going to be conversational AI. And so those two things coming together is where the combined roadmap has to happen.
Very good. And let's look at your future predictions. I mean, given the rapid pace of technological advancements, where do you see voice technology in, let's say, 5 or 10 years' time?
Yeah, so I think one is the concept of these assistants like Siri and Alexa is gonna become an anachronism, the way AOL is an anachronism now, right? It was a walled garden approach that was the early stages of the tech, but it's going to pervade everything. Two is, in the more near term, you're going to start seeing a mic button on every app, and the way we're going to experience voice is through apps. It's not going to be through a voice assistant. And then I think the third thing is we just don't know, right? I think the key to any new technology is just to start playing with it and using with it. I encourage everyone last November to start using ChatGPT 3.5 and then 4, just so they could understand what it could do and could not do. The same thing applies to voice, is we have to start using it. And I wish I could tell you what the next Uber is going to be coming out of this technology. But that's what makes it all exciting. We had interns here this summer. We had 35 interns at our company. And on the last day, I addressed them. I said, you know what? I wish I were in your shoes. The next 5 years is going to be more innovation than there's been in the last 5 for sure, maybe the last 20, as conversational AI and Gen AI come together. And it's just an awesome time. And it's been a while, right? We had all this breakthrough new stuff in like 2008, 2009 with mobile. And since then, it's been very incremental. And this is the first step function that we've had in quite a while.
Yeah, it's so exciting. It's just exciting to see voice technology being integrated into tools like ChatGPT now, and this will make a big difference. The next two questions I'm happy for you to take as widely or as narrowly as you want, but what about the future are you most concerned about?
So, I think, as an add-on to the previous question, is where I see voice in 10 years. It's going to be everywhere. I think what it's going to feel like is how the internet feels today. It doesn't feel like a thing. It just feels like it's everywhere. And that's where voice is going to be. I think I am most concerned about governments and regimes with substantial resources using both this technology and Gen AI for nefarious goals. It's not that a lot of people are concerned that these things run away on their own. I'm not super concerned about that. I'm much more concerned that figuring out how to improve hacking. There was a recent study that Gen AI, as an example, is 90% effective at hacking people's passwords in 10 tries, because they can, if they're fed personalized information about you. Because so many of our passwords are some iteration of like our dog's name, wife's name, husband's name, blah, 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 with an exclamation. Like when we do a special character, I think over 90% use an exclamation point, right? It's those kinds of things are what's scary. And I think that's a huge business going forward, obviously, is battling that. The second huge area is hallucinations, right? The hallucinations are really hard to stop because we don't even know exactly how they're happening. There's a lot of techniques now that are emerging, instead of just trying to stop the hallucination, that use a second LLM to look at the results of the first. And that's actually pretty effective. And so, from the user perspective, they don't really know that there's 2 or possibly 3 LLMs kind of all bouncing off each other. But I think in terms of getting these technologies out to the market in the near term, that's the biggest challenge. When I talk to CEOs, they say, hey, I understand how all this stuff could help me, but if my bot that's helping my customers tells them it's falling in love with them, I got a massive PR problem that's much bigger than the money I'm saving by implementing this technology. And so making it good and being able to measure that, I think, is one of the big challenges. I know there's a whole emerging category of how the analytics around this and how you measure performance. That's kind of the next, in the near term, kind of the next big challenge.
And what about the future are you most excited about?
That this is another technology that allows human beings to get away from all the rote work around typing and data entry and all the mindless stuff that we spend a lot of our days doing, both in education and at our jobs, and frees us to have much higher level thinking. And hopefully we will use that extra time for good and not just, more time on TikTok. But, that's, I think, like every other innovation over the last couple 100 years, it's going to just free up time. And hopefully we can use that time for good things.
Very good. Thank you so much for all of this. I really enjoyed your book. It's called The Sound of the Future, The Coming Age of Voice Technology. And I encourage anyone who wants to dive into this to have a read. For anyone else who ever wants to re-listen or re-watch this, simply head to my podcast or my YouTube channel, where you can find hundreds of other conversations on the future of tech and business. Thank you, Tobias.
Thank you, Bernard.